Hi, my name is Justin, and I'm going to show you how to create a message box in Excel. So the first thing is, obviously we're going to start a procedure. Okay, and a message box has 4 parameters, one of which is required. The required parameter is the prompt. So that, okay, and as you can see, we run it, and there's your message box. That's pretty much it. However, normally you're going to want to customize your message box a little bit more. With the second parameter. The second parameter is the style parameter, and within the style parameter you have 3 options. The first one being the buttons on the message box. The second option is icons displayed on the message box. The third is the default button location. There's also a fourth option that has to do with modality. That's kind of outside of the scope of this tutorial, so we're not going to deal with that. So let's add some buttons here. Alright, and an icon, let's do VB question, and we'll change the default button location. The button locations, default 1, 2, 3, and 4, those all start, the leftmost button on the box is going to be button 1, okay? So now if we run it, you can see we still have our prompt, our message displayed, but we've changed the buttons. No, the second button is the default button selected, and you can see we also have this icon here. Alright, and the last thing is the title. So the title by default is just going to be the name of the application, in this case Microsoft Excel. You can change that, and it lives here up in the left hand corner of the window. Okay, so 9 times out of 10, you're going to be using a message box to interact or capture input from the user, and I'm going to show you how you can do that. The first thing you want to do is declare a variable or dimensionalize a variable as a VB message box result. Okay, and then you have to set that variable equal to the function, the message box function. So we're going to say x equals, put it in parentheses, this message box. And then the last thing I'm going to ask it to do is print x in the immediate window to show you that the input from the message box function is stored in x and can be called upon later in your procedure. A second thing you're going to see is that our buttons here actually go through API interface and return integer values. So when I press yes, you're going to see a 6 in the immediate window. And no represents a 7. Okay, so another thing I want to demonstrate real quick is within the style parameter, our buttons here and our icons, these are constants, constant variables within VBA for Excel, and they actually represent integer values. So yes, no represents the value of a 4. I believe VB question, the icon, represents a value of 32. And you can see that whenever you're setting this parameter, you're using these plus signs. What you're doing is just you're adding 4 plus VB question, which is 32. And I'm not sure what VB default button 2 represents, but we're about to find out. And okay, so when I run this, didn't mean to do that, but you can see here it's printed yes and no, which is a 4 VB question of 32, and then default button 2 is a 256. And when I sum them together, that equals 292. And so what that means is when you're setting this parameter, and there's not that many style options really, and if you get familiar with them, you can just type the sum of those integer values and have the same result. So you can see the style of our box is still the same, even though I just typed 292 into the second parameter. Okay, so normally when you're using a message box, you're trying to interact with the user, and then obviously you're going to have to determine what the user, how the user responded. Okay, and you can use that by performing a conditional test. And there are really two statements that allow you to do this. The first is the if then else statement. And if you're familiar with Excel, then you probably are aware of the if formula in the Excel user interface. So perhaps you aren't as familiar with what's called the select case statement, and that's what I'll demonstrate here. So the first thing we do is change our message box a little bit to pose a question. Okay, and so now what will happen is the message box will be displayed, they'll respond, the result will be captured in the variable x, and then we're going to select case for some variable, and it'll be x this time. So we're going to say case is 6. And if you remember, if they click yes, that's going to return an integer value to x of 6. So we'll say case is 6, and then okay, and to show you that you can also use just the human interface there, VB no. We could use a 7. It really doesn't matter. Okay, so the last thing you do with this select case statement is you have to end it. If you don't end it, it won't compile right, and you'll get an error, and it'll let you know that you messed up. So when we run it, you can see here's our message box. We say yes, and then the next lines of code are the select case. So in this case it was the 6, so it gives us another message box. You said no. We run it again, say no, and that's pretty much the basics of a message box in VBA for Excel. I hope you found this tutorial useful.